I think we all know that on October the 7th, savages from the terrorist group Hamas went on a killing spree, targeting unarmed civilians in Israel, murdering over 1,400 Jews in cold blood. The barbaric nature of the killings shocked the sensibilities of anyone with a conscience, which means it didn't shock or even bother such vile anti-Semitic Jew-hating radicals as Rashida Tlaib or most of the faculty of Ivy League schools like Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. In fact, leave it to the far left to try and blame Israel for the psychopathic behavior of Iran-sponsored Hamas and their Palestinian enablers. Large rallies in cities all across the world, like New York, London, Paris, and Washington, D.C., showed support for Palestinians and ignored the atrocities suffered by innocent Israeli civilians. The horrors inflicted upon them, such as placing live babies in ovens, ripping open the womb of an Israeli woman who is 4 months pregnant, raping women repeatedly and violently in front of their children, are setting elderly people on fire while they were confined to wheelchairs, are just some of the acts these precious souls of Israel were subjected to. Some have called the beheading of babies in their cribs an act of animals, but animals don't act viciously and kill for the sport or for the purpose of just causing unspeakable pain. There's something else going on here, and it's not new. Jews have been targeted for extinction going back to the time of Abraham, when God chose the descendants of Isaac to inherit the land and to be designated as God's chosen people. Hating and wishing to annihilate Jews, it's irrational. There are only about 16 million Jews in the entire world. That makes up 0.2% of the world's population. Think about that. Just over 7 million of those Jews live in Israel. Slightly more Jews than that live in the U.S. So why would such a small minority of people be so hated and targeted, not merely for isolation and harassment, but for systematic elimination? And I say there's no rational answer. But there is an answer. And it's not political, geographical, economic, or religious. It is the result of spiritual darkness that originated in the very bowels of hell. It is the ultimate enmity between God and Satan. And we need to see it for what it is and be willing to resist this manifestation of sheer evil. I'm not a Jew, but without hesitation or reluctance, I stand with the Jews and I oppose the attempts to marginalize or murder them. I recognize that hate toward them is really hate toward God for having chosen them and blessed them. Hate crimes against Jews just in the United States are up 200%. After the Battle of the Bulge in World War II, there was a group of over 1,000 U.S. troops who were captured by the Nazis and placed in the Ziegenhain Stalag. In January of 1945, the Nazi commandant ordered the American Jewish soldiers to separate from all the other captives. The ranking American in the camp was Master Sergeant Roddie Edmonds, who hailed from Knoxville, Tennessee. He ordered every one of the American soldiers to fall out in formation when the Jews were ordered to report. The shocked Nazi major demanded that Sergeant Edmonds identify which ones were actually Jews. Sergeant Edmonds said, "We are all Jews here." The incensed German commander took a pistol and held it tight to Edmonds' head and threatened to shoot him if he didn't identify the Jews who would surely be murdered if they were identified. Sergeant Edmonds gave his name, rank, and serial number, and he told the Nazi commandant that he could shoot him, but unless he shot every one of the over 1,000 soldiers, he would be held responsible for the war crime, and they all knew who he was, and that he would pay for his crimes when the Allies won the war. The Nazi officer then withdrew. The courage of Sergeant Edmonds to declare that all of the soldiers were Jews saved the lives of 200 actual Jews in captivity that day. Sergeant Edmonds risked his life when he defied the order to identify the Jews among them. and boldly declare, we are all Jews here. 70 years later, Sergeant Edmonds would be the first ever U.S. serviceman to be named a righteous among the nations at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. There are now thousands of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of those 200 Jewish soldiers who, instead of being turned over to the Germans to be murdered, were instead saved by the heroic act of a farm boy from Tennessee, turned soldier, who ultimately would come home from the war, lead a good life, and ended up being father to Chris Edmonds, who was a Baptist pastor in Maryville, Tennessee, till just recently when he retired. So as we witness the unspeakable evils being inflicted upon Jews in Israel and all around the world, I pray that we all will summon the courage to stand with those whom Satan has targeted and defy the evil and say, we are all Jews here. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll consider clicking the subscribe button below and the notification bell next to it so you don't miss any of our future videos when they go up online.